We are live.
Thank you, Dr. Evans. Good morning, everybody. It's good to be on the call and an honor to be present as chair. Dr. Evans, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Dr. Blanton?
Present.
Dr. Bullock? Dr. Dempsey?
Present.
Dr. Fleming?
Present.
Miss Edwards?
Present.
Dr. Graham? Sorry. Dr. Houston?
Present.
Dr. Locklear?
Here.
Dr. Marr? Dr. Elliott?
Present.
Dr. Penfield?
Present.
Superintendent Truitt? I believe she might be just a little bit late. Miss Carper?
Happy to be here.
Dr. Holland?
Good morning. I'm here.
Thank you. Dr. Weddington?
Here.
Dr. Griffin?
Here.
Mr. Smith?
Here.
Mr. Patton? We have quorum.
Thank you, Dr. Evans. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome commission members, advisors, staff, on-site visitors, and online listeners to the September 8th, 2022 monthly meeting of the North Carolina Professional Educator Preparation and Standards Commission. This Standards Commission develops and recommends to the State Board of Education rules related to all aspects of educator preparation programs. I am Van Dempsey, Chair of the Professional Educator Preparation and Standards Commission, and I call this meeting to order. Our agenda and materials are available online through the DPI website, www.ncpublicschools.org, on the SBE meetings link. The meeting is also audio streamed through a link located at the bottom of the e-board agenda. I will now read the ethics statement that is required of us. Commission members are reminded that it is our duty to avoid conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflicts of interest as we handle the work of this commission. Does any member of the commission know of any conflict of interest or any appearance of conflict with respect to any matters coming before us at this meeting? If so, please state them for the record. If during the course of the meeting you become aware of an actual or apparent conflict of interest, please bring the matter to the attention of the chair. It will then be your duty to abstain from participating in discussion on the matter and from voting on the matter. I now call for approval of the agenda for today. Could I have a motion to approve?
So moved, Sam Houston.
Second, Connie.
The motion has been made and seconded. Any discussion or questions? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? The agenda is approved. Commission members, you have had an opportunity to review the proposed agenda for today's meeting. Do I have a motion to approve this agenda for the September? Oh, I'm sorry, we just did that. The minutes from our previous commission meeting on August 11, 2022, and have been prepared and made available to you. Do I have a motion to approve these minutes?
So moved.
Second, Chris.
Motion has been made and seconded. Any questions or discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Thank you all very much. Now, Dr. Seiberg and Tomlin and Mr. Tabari Wallace will present the NCDPI and SBE updates.
Good morning, everyone. This is Andrew. I'm going to hand it over to Tabari here because what we did was present what you guys have already heard, which is a background of the emerging information around how the principal preparation issues emerged and how they were addressed over the past year and a half. So let me hand it over to Tabari, and he can walk you through the outcomes and the formal recommendations that went over to the board. Tabari, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Dr. Seiberg.
Sure.
Good morning. Good morning to all my colleagues on the Pepsi Commission. It was so good to see several of you yesterday during Best in C's Innovation Lab. I'm going to ask Dr. Evans if you would go towards the end, because we reviewed this slide deck during the last meeting, and I'm going to ask Maria if she's on, if she would please give a quick summary of our work towards the end and what our recommendations and implications for further study, and then I'll pick it up from there. Maria, are you on?
Yeah, I'm here. Hi, guys. Thank you again for having me. Thank you, Tabari. So I'll jump right in because we kind of reviewed this with you guys before the state board meeting. And then when we spoke to the state board, I had them right before lunch. So I really zoomed through it with them. But ultimately, is this the slide you want me to start with, Tabari?
If Kim would go back one to the summary, to the recommend. One more, Kim. Right there. And I think Maria, that's her favorite slide. She could take it from there.
This one is the next one that I can do pretty much in my sleep, guys, because it really creates this comprehensive vision of the cyclical nature, and it lends itself to some of the things that the current processes are lacking. So ultimately, the next slide discusses a little bit of a circle, but right here we talk about making sure that we have the professional collaboration and that we are connecting to our EPP with our interns, and that the intern actually has this feelings of efficacy, motivation, and satisfaction. And that obviously speaks to a lot of the constructs that we're currently doing in our schools. So Ms. Kim, if you could go to the next slide. And then here we talk about the actual vision for our interns. And as I continue to do this presentation with Tabari and with various stakeholders, it really shows the cyclical nature of the vision constantly being connected to the data. So regardless of what our intern is doing, I think that what is currently able to be strengthened is that communication with the EPP among various levels, but also the managing and leading of the change that we're asking our interns to do. Empowering them to use various data to make different decisions, and ultimately the scope of a principal is entirely different than the scope of an assistant principal. And that continuously came up in both our research and our conversations, that as we're preparing these interns, one of the major gaps is the preparation for the holistic scope of the school, which includes everything from bus duty to the master schedule to the irate parent, to budget. Next slide, Kim. And this lends itself to the 21 competencies among the 8 different constructs for North Carolina leaders. And as you just take a minute, I think I reviewed this with you guys last time too. It's kind of uncomfortable to read that customer focus, but that's really what we need to empower our interns to be able to understand, is that their disposition is different if they're talking to a 5-year-old kindergartner versus a parent in carpool, or at a state board meeting if they're presenting something different. And I think some of those direct connections that are part of the internship process throughout those hours are really important to create this comprehensive project that they could potentially lead themselves with the internship with. Continuing to go, we talk about systems thinking and time management. These are skills that are continuously practiced in the day of the life of a principal, that we need to make sure we empower our interns to be given enough and ample opportunity to be successful in those. And then this is a working list. Many of you on Pepsi have various roles that have lent itself to both the teaching in the classroom to, superintendents. You can see the various levels of having an intern be part of your observation cycle, actually norming with your intern so that they can see both your vision and ideally align themselves with what their vision might be again. And I think this is really important, again, when we realize the difference between an assistant principal who is running under the vision of the principal to a principal who is running under the vision of their superintendent. And continuing to model behaviors that are both being a good leader and being a good worker. And continuing, we talk about interpretation of data. So you'll notice here we have some of the teacher working conditions survey. We talk about prioritizing and time management. Some of these things I personally roll my eyes at, but I've also had, 10 years experience. So having an intern, making sure that those are explicit lessons that are part of the standards that are aligned and part of their internship hours is of ultimate and paramount importance for success. Next slide, Ms. Kim, thank you. And then, of course, with every ebb, there is the flow. So, we wanted to make sure that we spent a little bit of time discussing the ineffective practices of some of the internships. Next slide. And that really is overwhelmingly, whether it was through conversation with our regional principals of the year, through the papers that we did all of our research on, but really the licensure test that was a mandate or a requirement provided absolutely no context for success within the internship cycle. Another thing that I've kind of mentioned is ensuring that we're empowering our interns and not just considering them a checkbox to be doing supervisions or duties. And then we really balance it. We wanted more time. All of the data supported the fact that we wanted more time in various settings to really prepare the interns for an opportunity for success. Only having them have a scope of elementary school, for example, really lends itself to be a handicap if they never experienced a high school. Even if they only had intentions of being a elementary school principal, opening up the opportunities for even just the exposure to solidify what their vision was a resounding, unanimous consideration that we wanted to express, was that we really wanted them to have various opportunities at a longer tenure of time. And then some of the lower bullets discussed the selection process for host principals. I think this is just kind of something that we wanted to broach, is if there was a little bit more consistency with the EPPs where everybody was unanimously on similar rubrics or similar expectations, it would create a comprehensive understanding of what everybody wanted from the outcome and the income for our incoming interns. And I think, Tabari, this is you now, right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Awesome job as always, Maria. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much, guys. I'm here too if you still need me.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next slide, Dr. Evans. Okay, and how we're going to improve the internship experience, cooperating principal selection process. Again, we must make this more rigorous. We want to definitely evaluate in the near future a two-tiered licensure process. One being when you finish your coursework and you go into an assistant principal, and then the second being when you obtain your continuing license, like in our cohort neighboring states that we looked at. Also, we want to make sure we increase the collaboration between EPP supervisors, cooperating principals, and I'm going to throw the HR specialists in there as well, because they're usually the liaison between the host principal and the EPPs. Okay, next slide. And again, here just for your reference, that those are the buckets that we looked at during the licensure overhaul from our 6 state cohort that we benchmarked with. Now, I know you're probably thinking today, you're probably like, okay, why did they go over that again? And the reason why is the results of the state board meeting. I had no less than 4 state board members come to me at the end, and Maria, and state this is much needed work. It's long overdue. Stay tuned. This is going to be incorporated in the policy aspect of our approach to principal prep. And when they say policy, or when it comes to recommendation, guess who that has to go through? All of us assembled here on this meeting, Pepsi. So in the future, before the sunset of the grandfather law, by 2024, we will be engaging you again with these sentiments. Again, I ask and I definitely implore your feedback in this matter. We ask that you look at these slides and anything that you can add or anything we need to retract. We're definitely open to suggestions before we hit the ground running after the vote next month, trying to formulate these recommendations into policy. But again, we'll first send them to your consideration, and then hopefully we can work with you in the future by coming up with a policy so we can reinforce our internship experience for the candidates that are currently in the pipeline and for future candidates. Again, as Maria said, we're coining these two. It's a dichotomy. We're coining these two as ineffective internship practices and effective internship practices. And I define that as ineffective internship practices is books, buses, and discipline. You're pretty much an operational specialist when you're at the school. And we don't train people to be operational specialists. We don't train people to be assistant principals. We train people to be principals. And you practice as you're an assistant principal, your craft. So when you are handed the keys to the kingdom and you're in charge of no less than between 200 and some schools, 2,500 students, that we all know the end result and we all can align the product that actually comes from our prep of our great site-based leaders. Okay, any questions? I know I threw a lot at you today, but any questions? Okay, all right. I'm going to take the old adage that Maria, we must have did a good job with the presentation because there was no questions. Again, if you
I was just going to say, Jabari, they have no questions. State Board attacked us with so many different questions. I was ready to really dive in and remove some of these slides or add different components. Okay.
Thank y'all so much. And again, my email, I know everybody has my email by now. But if you do have, if something comes to you later, please, we are definitely in search of your feedback so we can hopefully move this presentation from good to great. Okay. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you both, Ms. Evans. Dr. Evans, I'm sorry.
Mr. Wallace is going to talk about the recommendations for principal preparation that he presented to the state board.
Thank you, Dr. Evans. Okay, what we have here is the actual principal prep, the considerations for law, different tweaks we have to have in the law. And again, we went through this last meeting, so I'm gonna just jump to the recommendations and give you the summary. We recommend that you discontinue the licensure exam requirement to include an evidence-based portfolio. The internship will be defined as 10 months. We need to tweak the language in the law, and it is year-long. We do have a minimum range from 500, and I think it goes all the way up to 1,500 if you include TP3, the North Carolina Principals Fellows. You're going to require 4 years of work experience as a licensed educator to include teachers and support service personnel. And we're going to require a master's of school education, or if you have a master's in another field, we will require you to have an add-on license or participate in our licensure-only programs within our PPPs. Okay, there was extensive discussion. A lot of you probably heard it a couple of weeks ago, but it was extensive discussion around the inclusion of teachers and support personnel within the model, and whether or not we should be having a licensure exam or a portfolio. The state board discussed that, and we will see in October if it's going to be up and down vote or we'll have further articulations. Hey, did I cover everything, Andrew, Tom?
I think so.
Yep.
Y'all, that's the first time. Thank you, Tom. This is going to be a great day. Okay. Any questions? Any questions?
Dr. Holland has her hand raised.
Dr. Holland?
Good morning, all. Just real quickly, first of all, thank you for all the work you and the team have done on this. It's exciting from an HR perspective for me. This is much needed change and improvement. My question is around the year-long internship. Was there any discussion to having included in part of a program the need for someone to see the closing of a school year and the opening of a school year? I know that typically 10 months is going to be following the teacher schedule or their university schedule, which doesn't really allow them a lot of times to see closing out a school year and then all the work that goes on during the summer to open one. Has there been any discussion around having something like that included in a program, even if it's not part of their internship?
Dr. Holland, I'm so glad you asked that question. That was a big question during our internship work with our of the year. The North Carolina Principal Advisory Committee, we definitely considered that, and that will probably be inserted into the policy portion of this work, Dr. Holland. And I have to ask you this while I got you. May I please connect with you during that work so I can definitely get some great ideas and pick your brains about that part?
I am happy to be a thought partner. It might be better to actually get someone who's working directly with your interns, but I'm happy to, to work through any of it with you. Having done this from one of those people who's old as dirt. So yeah, I'm happy. I'm happy to be a resource. And if I can't help you, I know that there are several colleagues out there who would be willing to pitch in and work with you and the team and provide support for this.
Thank you so much, Dr. Holland. I'm putting your name down now. And we will be connecting in the future. But yes, we will take care of that particular tenet during the policy portion when we're formulating and we're finalizing the internships before we pass it over to y'all. Thank you, Dr. Holland. Okay, any other questions?
Tabari, this is Randy. I do have a question. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, great. So point number 4, and I think I recall either Andrew or Tom commenting on this before. I think the language in point number 4 is perhaps a little ambiguous. In the first part, require a master's of school of administration degree, that's clear, or a master's degree in another field, or require an add-on. And my understanding of the spirit is that if you had the master's in another field, that it would be that plus the add-on. And so I just wanted to, this may be a moot point, it may not matter, but if it does matter, that language in point number 4 be articulated clearly so it didn't have that ambiguity. I just wanted to raise that question.
And you are right. You are right, Randy. Dr. Jordan actually caught that during our debrief after the state board meeting. So in our next PowerPoint that we submit to the state board, that will be tweaked. But you are absolutely correct. If you have a master's degree in another field, then you must participate in our licensure only program and add it on. Yes, sir.
Yep. So it's a moot point. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you for catching that. Okay, is any other questions? Okay, over to you, Van.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Any other questions or comments? Dr. Evans, do we have further updates?
We do. Dr. Tomberlin will go next.
Thank you.
Good morning, Pepsi members. This is Tom Tomberlin, Director of Educator Preparation, Licensure, and Evaluation. And performance, not evaluation. Sorry about that. I'm here to present to you today the request for proposals for the coming school year for the the teacher compensation and advanced teaching roles. I will be really brief with this. The program requirements have not changed. We largely just updated the dates in this RFP. This is by law. This needs to go out by September 15th, where districts apply for funding to support local teacher compensation and advanced teaching roles programs in their districts. And then these proposals are due back to the state agency by October 15th, where we review them and make recommendations for funding in by December 15th. I saw a hand raised from Dr. Penfield. Did you have a question?
I'm sorry, Tom. No.
Oh, okay. No, that's fine. Next, Kim, do you go to the next slide? So here is a review of the proposal requirements. I won't read these to you, but they're available for you to review at your leisure. Next slide. One thing that is of interest here that we want to make sure everyone's aware of, the law does allow districts that applied for one round of funding to apply for a second round of funding. That is new, and that's at the discretion of the State Board of Education. what DPI is recommending to the field is that LEAs that are seeking to continue an existing program or their pre-approved program, that they not reapply, that they let us know they want to continue, and we will offer them some nominal funding to continue their programs. And that nominal funding comes with the class size flexibility waiver with this program. And so our hope is that we can achieve that with nominal funding, but they do have the right to reapply for the grant funding and continue to seek full funding for their program for another cycle. So we'll be reaching out to those districts. There are 3 districts that are in this situation this time around. We'll reach out to them to discuss their options, as well as releasing that RFP. We're scheduled to release that tomorrow, actually, so we're ahead of that September 15th deadline. And I'm happy to take any questions on this. I think any of you are aware of this program. There are a lot of aspects of it that coincide or relate to the pathways model that we'll be discussing later today. So I'm happy to take any questions about the program or any of the participants. All right. Kim, do we want to go to the evaluation real quick? So related again to the teacher compensation models and advanced teaching roles program, and Kim, I'll point out again that we need to take pilot out of that cover sheet. It's no longer a pilot program. So we have a statutory obligation to evaluate the programs across the state that are in existence. And unfortunately, that requirement has not come with funding until this latest budget cycle, where the budget bill did include some funds for evaluating the program. So we have contracted with the Friday Institute to evaluate these ATR models across the state. We don't have any data yet, so this report basically just gives the scope of work for that proposed evaluation. And for those of you who have interest in seeing how we're going to evaluate these programs, that scope of work is included in this report to the General Assembly with the commitment to presenting data on the evaluation at the October 2023 reporting requirement. So I'm happy to answer any questions on that that you might have, and gladly willing to hear feedback on our proposed evaluation process if any of you care to opine on that. And Dr. Dempsey, if there are no questions, I will turn it back to you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Dr. Tomberlin. Thank you, Mr. Wallace, Ms. Mills, and Dr. Seiberg and Tomberlin for your presentations and information today. Next, I will share the current draft of the North Carolina Pathways to Excellence for Teaching Professionals for our review and discussion. I want to make a few comments before we start the process of looking at the document, if you'll give me the privilege. This is a presentation of the initial draft of the document that has been synthesized from across the work of the subcommittees. I want to thank members of the subcommittees who have been working on this now for 18 months since we received our request and charge from the North Carolina State Board of Education to take up this work in Pepsi. I also want to thank the many current and retired educators, stakeholders, stakeholder groups, and North Carolina citizens who have provided feedback about the work that we have been doing. I want to thank the staff at DPI for their efforts, which have been huge. to provide logistical, scheduling, calendar, and communication support in terms of the logistics and the support of the work of the subcommittees. I want to thank the current and previous members of Pepsi, in particular Patrick Miller, the chair, for doing the work to get us to the point of having this discussion today. The plan for today is to walk through the draft of the model and the attached draft salary schedule that you have received and is posted on the State Board website. Today is for information only. There will be no action on the draft today. Dr. Evans is going to assist in terms of both the review of the presentation in the PowerPoint and how we synthesize the draft, and also the staff and co-chairs may have clarifying information that they can share as we work through the document. The slides and the salary scale are both available. We will move deliberately today to cover the draft language. We'll try not to be tedious, but we want to make sure members of Pepsi have an opportunity to see the draft language collectively. You will see language that is in the draft that has come from the subcommittee's strike-through language, watermarks that say draft color-coded language, and other ways that indicate that this is a draft document, and that is intentional. So you will see that as we work through the document. We'll pause for each segment to make sure there are not any clarifying questions, or if you have questions, and to note those questions. And if you would please put questions that you have in the chat so we can capture those, so we can include those in the record and include those in the process of refining the draft. We will continue to expect and invite feedback from subcommittee members, co-chairs, stakeholders, and stakeholder groups that will help us to refine this document and make it stronger. At the next Pepsi meeting or meetings, members will have updated drafts that will be publicly accessible. It is important to capture the language of this discussion as recommendation language. In my own mind, I think of it as declarative statements. How do we improve the recommendation language that is in the document? Dr. Evans, if you will assist, we will walk through the presentation and we'll pause at each one. I won't literally read the language that is in the document, but you'll see a pattern in the structure of the document. And we're walking through the structure of the presentation is the licensure structure. So beginning with the apprentice, you'll see as a model information about the apprentice license, the requirements and the supports. And please put your comments or questions in the chat as we go through. Or raise your hand and we'll try to note that. You'll see the initial teacher success program repeated in additional slides. Some of the elements of this will carry through multiple licensure areas. You'll see, for example, you'll see at the bottom of this slide, the underline is language that has been added to the draft. The draft, by the way, after it was synthesized, has been reviewed by the co-chairs. The co-chairs spent about 2 hours looking through the language, and you'll see some of the language that's in there now as a result of that discussion with the co-chairs. Dr. Evans, if there are not any questions. So before we transition, any apprentice license section questions or comments that people would like to raise now?
Ann, this is Ann. I just want to refresh my memory. This person does not have to have a four-year degree. Is that correct?
I believe that is correct. Dr. Evans, an apprentice does not hold a bachelor's degree.
This is Connie, just for
correct.
clarity, but they're working towards a bachelor's degree. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yes. The expectation would be they're moving toward a license, which would require a bachelor's degree. They're moving toward a further license.
So logistically, would there have to be some paperwork? I know I'm in the weeds, some paperwork that says they have affiliated for a bachelor's? It's just a note I think we ought to make. They have to for residency. So I was just thinking this might need the same kind of thing.
Thank you, Ann. Would you mind dropping that in the chat, Ann, to make sure we catch that? Dr. Bo, to make sure we catch that.
No problem.
Thank you. Any other apprentice questions?
This is Connie again. Back to Ann's question. I think it's on the next page, the next one. If unable to meet requirements for license 1, the teacher can still qualify. So basically, I'm assuming that if they do not meet the requirements for licensure, they can still go in as a teacher assistant. So I guess that goes back to Ann's question, making sure that that is clear in the information that they are working towards that degree.
That's my interpretation of the draft. A person who is in an apprentice license has assumed an expectation of becoming ultimately a further license toward license 4. So they would have to complete the bachelor's degree. They would move toward that license, which is a difference between an apprentice teacher and someone who's at a TA position. Dr. Evans, that sort of is a simple summary of the conversation?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I do want to point out, I'll use this slide as an example. As you're reading through this now and subsequent to this meeting, as I encouraged people yesterday at the Innovation Lab, it's really important for people who have not been seeing this document as it developed to read carefully. So if the next to the last bullet in that slide is an example of a recommendation that came out of one of the subcommittees, I think it was preparation and entry, that candidates who are in EPPs doing a 16-week internship would receive a prorated compensation or salary based on what the person who would hold an apprentice teacher license would receive in that $30,000 salary that's at the top of the slide. And so it's important for people. There's a lot of information in the draft, and so it's important to read it deliberately and methodically, particularly for people who are seeing it for the first time. Moving toward license 1, license 1. We can go to the next one, Kim.
I believe the licensure committee took out the micro-credential at this license level. We only suggested micro-credentials for advanced teaching levels.
Okay, I'm sorry, Dr. Bullock, I didn't pick that up.
That was a few meetings ago. That wasn't in the last meeting. Just, I'm not sure that.
I don't remember that being formally voted on, so I think that's why I didn't take that out.
Yeah, we can make a note of that.
I'll send it in the chat.
Thank you, Dr. Bullock.
Sure.
Dr. Dempsey,
Yes, sir.
may I ask a clarifying question about that so staff is clear? So you would not be able to establish competency for the license through a prescribed set of micro-credentials. That would not be a path to clearing the content or pedagogy requirements for holding the license.
It would not be one of I'm assuming, Dr. Tomlin, it would not be one of the tools in this particular component, according to Dr. Bullock's point.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's too. I'm assuming others will have points to make about that as well, but we want to make sure we note the subcommittee's work. Any questions on the two, before we move into the micro-credentials, any questions on this slide and the previous one about license 2?
This is Michael Marr. I just have one quick kind of clarifying question. So would that mean if you didn't include the micro-credential here, that would preclude an EPP from establishing a set of micro-credentials that they used in their residency or alternative licensure program?
Michael, I'm going to respond to that. This is Ann.
Yeah.
It would not, because an EPP could now have that as part of their coursework, but they're signing off on it like equivalent, what I would call, I'm just going to use this language, equivalent to a course. We've been told all along that these micro-credentials would be from DPI, that would be, vetted and reliable and valid and be statewide. So those are the micro-credentials that I'm speaking about in this conversation.
Okay. Yeah,
Does that make sense?
Helps.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that means you could not, independent of an EPP, just do a series of micro-credentials to clear the license.
Correct.
Great. Thank you.
Dr. Tomlin?
I'm sorry. So that just, I thought I was clear, but now it just confused me. So I want to make sure we're understanding that. So I get what Dr. Bullock just said, that so a candidate for licensure could not simply do a set of micro-credentials and get licensed. But I want to make sure that we're hearing that a person who has gone through a preparation program, a State Board of Education approved preparation program, and is now contemplating how they will satisfy the content and pedagogy requirements to convert the license, that micro-credentials would not be an option, or let's take micro-credentials off the table, demonstrated performance on content or pedagogy would not be an option for them to clear the license. Because this doesn't just affect this piece right here, it affects that chart that comes a little later on the options for a teacher to clear this one right here. So that micro-credential section, that should also be coming out of that, because this also poses the same thing, like you've done your State Board of Education approved program, and here's how you present the evidence to NCDPI that you've met the the standard for content and pedagogy. So that would no longer be an option in that graph either.
So what the licensure talked about was for anything below license 3, that's what we talked about, that it wouldn't be a micro-credential could not replace a piece. I need to go back and look at my notes, Tom.
Okay. I think there's two separate issues that are coming here, and that's what I'm seeking clarity on. Is I understand that micro-credentialing cannot replace state board approved preparation.
Correct.
The question is, can a micro-credential function in place of the function of the praxis or the EdTPA? Is essentially what the question is. I get the first one, but the second one is what
it doesn't. But the slide doesn't. I think part of this is the presentation of the slide, and I think it doesn't read clearly that that's what we're asking, right? So I think we're going to have to come back and revisit this, and I need to look at my notes and I need to look at the minutes, because we were very clear that there could not be the first part, right? Like you can't just do this side thing, but we are proponents of options for the praxis.
Okay.
Very clear on that.
All right.
And we talked a lot, of course, in our last meeting about 1, 2, 3, the 4th and 5th levels, right? Like the peer and then the one in yellow, y'all, in this chart, the last 2 rows. We talked a lot about that in our last meeting. So I need to go back and be clear. So I apologize, I'm not quite clear on that in terms of the options for the praxis, because we definitely, I want to be very clear that the licensure group is very much a proponent of having options for the praxis. However, we're wondering about these last 2 possibly being better options.
And could you work with Kim and me between now and the next meeting to make sure this document includes that clarifying language?
Sure, happy to.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you for both of you and all 3 of you for raising the question. We want to get that clear in the draft. Kim, can you go back to where we were with the license 2 point? Any other license 2 in terms of these 2 slides before we look at the micro-credential slides? Okay, let's go ahead to the next one.
Dr. Dempsey, I'm sorry. May I ask a question?
Please.
So in terms of the conversation that was just had about these license levels and thinking of micro-credentialing, I'm trying to stay away from the way we currently do it to really focus on what this will look like going forward. But I'm wondering if anyone from licensure or prep and entry can articulate how your career and technical education folks might fall into these. Are we going to now ask our folks who are CTE provisionals who have a certain set of criteria to be licensed to now go through ed prep programs? Or will there be, and when I read this initially, I thought, well, micro-credentials would work for the ed prep programs because it's similar to what they're doing already. So I just want to make sure I understand that, because that's a very specific group and process for licensure.
Do any of the co-chair of the 2 subcommittee co-chairs, of which I'm one, want to speak to that?
Hey, this is Hank. It seems to me, and I may be off here, but when I was thinking about the micro-credentials here and say it's something that the state has vetted and has available as a choice, the way I'm thinking about how the preparation program can still, use those micro-credentials as a choice is if they choose to allow students and believe that those micro-credentials actually show what they want as a part of their preparation program. Another assessment tool that they could use to validate whether or not they've met particular standards. Not that they could do it on the side, but as a part chosen by the institution or the EPP as one of the options that could be used. And that would go for CTE as well.
I think. Marcy, did you, if you haven't, could you put that question in the chat? Because, excuse me, we'll circle back to the co-chairs and look at the subcommittee's discussions to make sure we get that clarified.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Dr. Stockman.
I just want to clarify Marcy's question. So, Marcy, are you asking the distinction between a restricted CTE license and a what we would call kind of an academic CTE license, where you've done a prep program? In the latter, you've done a prep program that led to CTE licensure. In the former, what we call the restricted, that doesn't presuppose even in some cases, a bachelor's degree. It could be more based on work experience. Is that the distinction you're drawing there? And would the restricted then fall under these rules?
Yes. Yeah, that's a great summary, Tom. Trying to make sure that we're not eliminating those pathways for those restricted CTE licensure procedures, because that is so critical for school districts.
Agreed. Dr. Dempsey, one suggestion might be that we make clear up front in this that we're always talking about licenses. I don't want to call them academic licenses because that kind of seems to regulate the restricted licenses to anyway. We just need to distinguish that this is about the licenses that are generated from a state board approved preparation program, and not those restricted licenses that are governed by the CTE restricted license policy. Marcy's point is great. We don't want to signal to the field that we're changing the restricted CTE licenses. That would be detrimental.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. And Hank, to Hank's comment a few minutes ago, we were pretty consistent in prep and entry in terms of our understanding that CTE was CTE was a more nuanced situation than some other license, broadly speaking, licensure areas might be. And so I think there was an understanding in our subcommittee that we had to be mindful of the kinds of points that Marcy raised.
Ours as well in licensure, that we would remain flexible, and CTE would kind of follow its own quote, trade-oriented CTE license would follow their own process as they're doing probably now, is what we were thinking.
Thank you, Ann. Dr. Evans, if we could go ahead and go to the next slide. The next two slides give an overview of the micro-credential components of the model.
I just want to point out that this is a pedagogy micro-credential definition and not a content definition here.
Thanks. We could go to the next slide. And Dr. Evans, I'm going to ask you to explain the slide, or Dr. Tomlin, I think you can do that better than I can.
Sure. This is basically just setting up the notion that micro-credentials can be micro-credentials are small, discrete skills, but they can be collected together to measure a larger subject area. And I think some of the term that might be used as maybe a macro credential, or a some other terms are being used to denote these collection of these small discrete skills into larger buckets. A credential maybe dropping the micro piece. And this is just to illustrate how you could create this larger bucket of understandings for something like subject matter expertise. So you could have these foundational, you could develop a series of micro credentials that would measure those at these basic levels that increase in their intensity to where, once a candidate passed, let's say, these 6 micro credentials, that would put them at the intermediate level. And then you could have even more that would constitute the advanced level. So it's just kind of trying to explicate how these micro credentials can build on each other to give you confidence that the person has achieved a basic, intermediate, or advanced level of knowledge in that particular larger credential area.
Thank you, Tom.
Dr. Dempsey, this is Randy. Can I make a comment on this slide or a suggestion?
Please.
For the first bullet point where it's in orange, tools designed to measure impact, I'm wondering if we can make it a practice in our language if we say, use the term validated. For example, tools designed to and validated for example. I just want to ensure that we're not losing sight of the importance of using instruments and assessments that lead to valid interpretations of what we're intending to measure.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I'll ask you to put that in the chat, make sure you drop that in the chat so we capture it. That was a question when the co-chairs met, and I know we talked about it in our subcommittee, that making sure we had that language, I mean, basically moving on what you see, the strike-through language there, language we wanted to move away from, but how to phrase it in a way that was succinct, but said what was important to say. So I'm sure everybody will appreciate that suggestion. But I think also it's important to note in that particular, the tools design sentence, that the student learning component was critical in the conversations. And to your point, Randy, making sure that the tools that we have are credible to do that.
Thanks. I'm putting this in the chat.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We could go ahead to the next slide. This is the one that we jumped to a few minutes ago.
Can I just request that when you add things in the chat that you make sure that you reference what license you're talking about, or even possibly the slide, so we can make sure that we match up comments and questions to the correct license or slide. Thank you.
Dr. Evans, as people are following through, the categories and components connects back to the explanation of the micro-credentials. And if, Dr. Evans, if you could explain to people basically how this chart summarizes this use of categories and components. Or Dr. Tomlin.
Dr. Tomberlin, did you want to do it?
Sure. So basically what we're saying is that the candidate for licensure, for clearing the license, has the option to demonstrate their content and pedagogical expertise in a variety of methods. So, and the way we're interpreting this and the work of this committee is that the pathways are interchangeable. So one could elect to do the praxis exam to establish their content knowledge and choose their EVOS scores for establishing their pedagogy, or vice versa. So what this model represents I think when we counted this up, there's like 12 different configurations that a teacher would have available to them to establish their competency in content or pedagogy in order for satisfying the licensure requirements. That's the purpose of this matrix, to show kind of you could choose one component from any of the categories, and for the other component you could choose any other category to satisfy that component, with the caveat that EVOS could only be used for one. In all cases, the examination, the micro-credentials, if that continues to be a way to demonstrate your competency for the license in content or pedagogy, and then the tools designed to measure the impact of student learning through a peer collegial review process, those can all be satisfied. You could use the same category for both components, with the exception of EVOS or these tools designed to measure impact on student learning, whatever that may look like. That could only be used for one or the other, but not both.
Thank you.
I just want to make an editorial note that I probably should have picked up in the co-chairs meeting, that at the very bottom, beyond the yellow, it still says QGR, and that needs to be stricken from the record, because it's struck, whatever the word is, on all the
at the bottom here.
Yeah, see it at the very bottom.
It is struck through. It's just really faint.
Okay. Good. I can't see. That's just my problem, not yours. Thanks, Kim.
and I couldn't see it either on the screen. I had to look at my printout. It's
sorry. Got it. Thank y'all.
So we can go ahead and go to the next slide. And the language, Randy, that you recommended we would carry through the document anywhere else that reference is made.
Yeah, thanks, Van. I'm actually just typing. I went through the slides and I'm typing a note now with the slides that I noticed, but it may occur on others too.
Yeah, we would try to catch that everywhere.
Yep.
I will point out in this particular slide, as best as I was able to follow what was happening across the subcommittees, this slide is a good example of incorporating discussions and recommendations from multiple subcommittees into the synthesizing it into the revisions. And this is an example of seeing that kind of work come together.
Man, I don't know if it would be helpful if I just mentioned here about the licensure committee could not come to a good consensus regarding how long would be the correct amount of time for being in these licensure levels. And that's why it says 2 or 3 years, because we just don't have a clear, because if it's 3 years at license 1 and 3 years at license 2 and 6 years at license 3, that's 12 years. And it's just, we talked about that last time, but I just think everybody needs to think about what might be appropriate.
Right. Before we move to the next one, that's going to be all of the information on license 2. That's a lot of information. Any questions in the license 2 space before we move on to 3?
Van, this is Hank. The only thing that we have a bullet here that says effectiveness data can be collected while holding a license 2. I don't know where we landed on whether license 1 could be the teacher of record, and if they were, would this bullet need to be added to that one as well?
I'm trying to thumb back to that. It says, Hank, if you go back to license 1, it says co-teacher of record with a license for advanced teacher. For that's for license 1. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. But to your point about, I think at least at this stage, and maybe in the final document, repetition of information is probably better than losing continuity and not being clear. So to repeat it is not necessarily a bad thing.
Hey, Van, this is Chris. I do just want to make sure I'm understanding that second bullet correctly. If unable to meet the requirements for license 3, the teacher can still qualify for a classified TA position. So, and this may go into the discussion that we were having a minute ago, but that's, so if they're unable to in either 2 or 3 years, then they revert back. Is that right?
To a TA. So, Chris, that's what you're asking?
Yeah, yes, correct.
They could.
Okay.
Chris, this is Maureen. I don't know if it's necessarily that we would say that they revert back, but more that we would give them an option to remain in a classroom continuing to work toward the requirements of that license. So they would not be put back into a license 1, which I think we would refer to as revert back. There will be no backward movement in this model, but there would be an option to continue supporting that professional as they continue working on the requirements to fulfill that license.
Okay, and that's helpful. I guess the reason for my question is because I could see some people who are making progress and who would ultimately be wonderful educators and classroom teachers that may deter them if that's the way that's read and looked at. So I think that's helpful.
I think maybe Maureen, I think I remember you were the person that discussed this in the co-chair meeting. We have to be careful not to sort of substitute apprentice for classified teaching assistant. Apprentice is a licensure status. TA is different. And so when Tamara's point about it's not stepping back in licensure, it's moving into a different structure. Maureen, did I say that fairly clearly enough?
Yes, that's exactly right, Dr. Dempsey. You're not moving backward. It's just an option so that you can continue being supported and working at completing the license level that you're at. Absolutely.
Thanks. If there are no other questions or comments, we'll go to license 3. I will admit, as Kim and I were reviewing this, prepping for the meeting, my eyes wanted this turned into 2 slides to make the font bigger. That's still an editing option. There's a lot of information on the slide. And I think we can go to the next one, and we can come back if people have questions. And would you mind, you brought it up a second ago, would you mind saying what you said in the co-chairs meeting about the accumulated effect of time in different licenses? Your point about the 12 years, would you mind sharing that just so people have that in their thinking as we're working on this?
Right. So we have here a license 3 would be 6 years, which we took a lot of thought around to come to that conclusion, to make it equitable across and to match what are a little bit beyond what a recurring license is now, and just lots of reasons. There are lots of reasons this is at 6 years, and the licensure subcommittee feels very confident that this is a fair number for license 3 to show growth, to do the things you need to do, to have enough time, to not make, my favorite line is to not make DPI staff come up with a loophole, to keep people in there that are just not showing one piece. But when you add license 3 at 6 years with license 1 and license 2, we currently have license 1 and license 2. Well, license 1, they're working on a bachelor's degree, right? So they need a bit of time to do that. But if you have 3 and 3 and 6, that's 12 years before they've basically cleared their license, right? Or beyond an initial license. If you do 2 years in license 1, that's just not enough time for someone to get a bachelor's. But so the combination between the particularly license 2 and license 3 needs to be looked at carefully, so we don't, 1, knock people out too soon, but 2, create a situation where someone's teaching for 12 years, in a classroom with no co-teaching, and there hasn't been a make or break point at that point. So it's just, it's something that we could not come to a clear decision about because there's just so many factors related to it, but it's something that needs to be looked at.
Right.
Does that help, Van? I hope it helps.
Yes, thank you. I think it's It's a really important.
Yeah.
It's a really important decision. How long can a person be in that part of the continuum?
Yeah.
Dr. Dempsey, it's Maureen. If I could just make one comment real quick.
Sure.
So just a quick reminder that a licensed one teacher does have a bachelor's degree already. It's the apprentice teacher who would be kind of similar to what we would have as student intern teachers coming out of EPPs who would not have earned their bachelor's degree yet. And then the second point is that teachers would be able to move through that process faster. So we're not saying that if the decision is, it's 12 years to go from a license 1 to a license 4, that teachers would be required to take that full 12 years. They would be able to progress through that faster if they meet each one of the competencies to move to the next licensure level. But the 12 years would give teachers the opportunity to take that period of time to move through the licensure level from 1 to 4 if they needed that full period of time.
So what is the level that they don't have to have a bachelor's degree again? The apprentice level is not license 1?
The apprentice level is not license 1. So they're two different licenses. So apprentice level is the first one, that $30,000 a year licensure level with the intern, like the 16-week internship. And then the license 1 teacher does have to have a bachelor's degree, but they would be a co-teacher with a license 4 teacher because they do have the content knowledge based on their bachelor's degree, but they would not have the teaching experience. So that's why they would be paired with a co-teacher, license 4 advanced co-teacher.
Okay. So again, it's a long time, and this is something we need to think about. Like really think about again, so they don't ramp off too soon and they're not on the highway forever.
Right. And in resolving that question, as we move forward, it's going to affect multiple license because it's an accumulated effect.
Yes.
Potentially.
Yes.
Yeah. Any other questions with license 3? And thank you for your patience as we work through this. Okay, license 4. Kim, if you go ahead and go to the next one.
I'm sorry, Van, did you want to go to the next slide?
Yeah, I think we can. We can come back to this one if people have questions. I've not pointed this out much as we've worked through it because we'll address it in a supplemental document. You will see, obviously, in the banner at the top, you see the salary component, but there are also bullets within the text about implications for salary and compensation. So in the license 4, there's a statement down toward the bottom, annual salary increase at 1% based on years of experience, and then sub-bullets, reinstatement of master's pay, and a reference to national boards. So.
Dr. Dempsey, would you like to look at the Word doc, the PDF, during this license?
let's go ahead and get to the end if you don't mind, and then we'll
Okay.
look at it
Right after.
right after
Okay.
the last slide.
Great.
You go to the next one, Kim.
You know, one of the things that was batted around, but I don't see it on here. Oh, I do see. We have NB National Board, NB on here, or we have NBCT. Do we have National Board for as a renewal method? I know that was discussed. What does NBCT stand for?
National Board Certified Teacher. And we did discuss that at the co-chairs meeting and made the recommendation that should be considered as one of the evidences that teachers could use to demonstrate their effectiveness.
Okay, so on here it's a question mark. So that's why I'm.
Yeah. So Maureen, we could take the question mark off. We could turn that into a statement.
I mean, my personal opinion is based on the conversation we had at the co-chairs meeting. I think yes, but that's not a unilateral decision for me. But okay. My vote on that would definitely be yes.
Okay. Well, Kim, let's make sure we circle back and confirm that with the co-chairs and the subcommittee.
Okay.
And a master's degree is also not on here.
It's on the previous slide, I think.
It's on the previous one?
Yes, and it's also part of the PDF that we have not reviewed yet.
So could you show me the previous slide again, please?
Sure. It's right here, reinstatement of master's pay.
Okay, all right. So that's a rate related to salary. That's not related to renewal.
We did not discuss using the master's degree as renewal as far as I remember, but I may be mistaken on that.
No, and no action was taken on that if it has been discussed in a particular subcommittee.
Okay, so I'd like for the co-chairs or whomever is going to discuss this at this point to discuss that as well. I'd like to put that on an agenda, please.
Can you add that to the chat?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Ann. Ken, if we can go back to 19, slide 19. And then we go to the next one. Okay, the next couple of slides are the adult leadership designation. Kim, if we can go to the final slide. So before we move over to the salary and compensation document, are there any questions now that we've seen the full draft that would help with clarification? We've got a lot of work to do in terms of finalizing the document, but just in terms of clarifying what you've seen so far. And thank you for all the comments in the chat. So Dr. Evans, let's go ahead and pull up the salary draft. Anything you can do to make that bigger? We'll point out there are two parts to this: the narrative, the explanation part. There is a draft scale, salary schedule on the back end of the document. And assuming people have the document in their hand or on a different screen, are there any questions about how the document is framed and the information that's in it? Kim, could you pull go to the last page just to have the scale on the screen?
Dr. Dempsey, you wanted the schedule, correct?
Schedule, yeah, I keep saying scale, but the schedule is what I mean. Any questions about this, excuse me, this part of the documentation?
I just have a question. What formula or what did they use to come up with this? In general, I need like a 1 or 2 sentence answer, not like a in depth.
Somebody from budget and compensation able to answer that?
Yeah, I believe that's, if my math is correct, I believe that's 1% each year. Is how we came up with it, is how that scale from the license 4 plus 1 year on.
So do we look at like the average teacher salary in the nation? I mean, where did the license 3 number come from? I'm just curious.
Yeah, that has been so long ago. I know we had that conversation. Those were we did a lot of those numbers several months ago. I know a lot of that was just around a discussion. We did talk about averages, and we talked about where you would be at today. We discussed longevity and all that as well, which I would defer Dr. Graham. I don't know if you have any. I was trying to say, other than it being an arbitrary number, I don't know that we use necessarily any formula at that point. Most of our work was on license 4 because that's, a bulk of teachers.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Dempsey?
Yes, sir.
Could I assist here a little bit?
Please do.
So these numbers, Dr. Graham, we couldn't hear you. So if you want to speak to that calculation. All right, thank you. So the license 4 plus masters is the 10% salary differential that is currently in this teacher salary schedule. So you're seeing a 10% salary increase at every step of that step salary for that begins with license 4. I will point, and then the national board certification is the 12% on the 56. What this doesn't do is create a column where one holds both those things. So it doesn't include a license 4 plus masters plus NBCT. So just to answer the general question, is the 10% salary premium for holding a master's degree at the license 4 level and a 12% salary differential for those who hold national board certification for every corresponding step on the license 4 scale.
Do you know what data was used for the 45,000? That's really my question.
Yeah, I think she's asking for license 1, license 2, and license 3.
Really just license 3. 1 and 2 kind of come back from license 3, right? But I don't want us to spend an hour answering my question.
No, and I think the very short answer on that is we were starting at, we'll say, license 4 and stepping backwards. we had 2 or 3 meetings on, and again, this was a while ago, but 2 or 3 meetings on what the starting salary would be for each of these license levels. And those numbers were more developed off of conversations within the subcommittee. And so I think the question is, well, is 45,000 an arbitrary number? Yes, in many ways it is, but that number may have been 40,000 when we first started, and felt like we need to have a conversation on increasing that even more. And I think the numbers you see here, which are clearly higher than current salary schedule is today, but those were just simply around conversations we had in the subcommittee. And then when you get into license 4, just like Tom was saying, when you get into license 4 and higher and adding in masters, that's math. But I think the license 1, 2, and 3 were numbers we had conversations about and felt like that was a good place to go. So I don't know that, while we did talk about average salary, I know a lot of our think tank groups helped us out with some of that. We did have the calculator on what the cost would be. I think that's just where we landed.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you. I'm sorry I didn't give a fancier answer than that, but.
Thank you, Aaron.
If I may add to that, we did have discussions early on. There were some recommendations that we started from that came from discussions around work that the Human Capital Roundtable had done prior to the subcommittees convening to work on this. So we built off of that. There were recommendations initially for higher salaries and even some lower salaries. And I think this is where we landed through negotiation and discussions. Keeping in mind that there is a finite state budget ultimately. There is a wonderful calculating tool that was created by, I can't remember the name now, my apologies, that we used also in our work. We spent a great deal of time coming to these figures and looking at duties and responsibilities.
Thank you, Marcia. And I do want to add, I think, if there's ever an argument out there, we'll use license 3, for example, why was it not 44 or why was it not 46? I think there's valid arguments either way. I think using the tool we had, and again, kind of some experts within the subcommittee, that we landed on these numbers. And so, I don't, want to keep driving home the point, but I do think that, there's room, like I said, there's room for improvement. And like I said, if everyone said, by gosh, it's got to be 46,000 and not 45, I don't want to speak for our group, but I mean, I don't know that these numbers are things that we just, beat each other up on or studied real hard. But I think the argument can be made. They're good numbers.
Any other questions or comments about the salary schedule document?
Dr. Simpson, I want to point out that Madison Edwards has a question that I think one of the salary subcommittee chairs should answer.
Okay. Is it in the chat?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
While you're looking at that, this is Sam Houston. I don't know that you can. I don't know how you even debate the salary issues that we've been talking about. I could contend that these are still not high enough, but certainly a significant improvement over what we're dealing with at the present time. And I would hope we have some escalator in the process when we finally get to that point that addresses the base in each of the licensure levels. Sooner or later, the base has got to go up, even though there's an incremental increase all the way through years of experience. We'll end up one day at a blocked opportunity to keep up with what seem to be escalating salaries in other professions. So, and then we'll probably get to a point sometime when this thing goes to the General Assembly, the debate will be, we can't afford it, which we all know is not true. There's plenty of money in the budget to afford issues of this type. It's just whether or not we want to spend it for those purposes. So I'm sorry I interrupted, but I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Dr. East. The question in the chat from Madison, do licenses 1 through 3 continue to receive step increases as well? Kim, you and I had talked about that. It had not been built in 1, 2, and 3 in this draft. If the assumption is those 3 licenses would receive that annual increase, but it would be time limited because of the amount of time they can be in the license.
I want to give the co-chairs a chance to respond to that, but I will say that license 3 was on their August agenda to consider that, and they did not have a chance, enough time to discuss that.
Okay. And we have the question in the chat, so that'll prompt us to come back to it.
Yeah, and I will just add to that too, you know, the quick answer to that is no. We just ran out of time in addressing that. Now, the ultimate goal is license 4. And so at this point, no. Now, that doesn't stop the legislature from ever increasing that. If they give a 2% increase, certainly that individual at a 1, 2, 3 would be subject to that. But we simply ran out of time in determining what those steps would look like, percentage-wise, dollar amount-wise, whatever it may be. I'm not sure if it's too late to do that, but the good news, I hope, in this is the ultimate goal is license 4. And that's where we want people to get. And then I know Hank had asked a very good question as well, or made a statement. The intent of the subcommittee was that master's pay is subject to, or you'd be receiving master's pay if you received it before that cutoff, how many ever years ago. If you received your master's during this dead period, you would receive your master's pay then. And if you received your master's degree in the future, you would receive it at that point. So it is the intent of the committee that master's pay would be implemented for any of those that's ever received one, grandfathered in, or will receive one in the future.
Thank you. So, Kim, I think we can take this down now, and unless people have other questions about this document.
And again, I don't want to speak for Dr. Graham, so he certainly can share his thought on that. I saw Ann's comment on talk about license 3. You know, again, I'm not sure if that's something Pepsi handles altogether, or I guess we would at this point. It wouldn't be, I guess, just committee co-chairs. But I know that's one of the items we just simply ran out of time, and so happy to work on that, but or our subcommittee would be. But if we're past the subcommittee phase, I guess it would have to be Pepsi at large.
Did we want to talk about anything hold harmless that's on this? The transitioning current teachers, out-of-state teachers?
It may be good for I don't know if Dr. Tomlin wants to get into that. He can speak to it a lot better than I can, I think, on what would constitute hold harmless, other than salaries are held harmless.
Yeah, my understanding is that the hold harmless provision would apply to anyone whose salary would be reduced in and based on our modeling for this, those percentages were very, very low, and generally affected those teachers who had 25 plus years of experience, were grandfathered into the master's pay and held the national board license. The idea would be a recommendation to hold harmless until such time as their compensation was equal to or more under the new model than it was under the old model. But I think the estimates were like 90% of teachers. The best we could model this would receive a substantial increase in their salary. But there are a few places where a hold harmless would be necessary.
Dr. Graham just responded to the Madison's point in the chat. To the, it's my intention, and hopefully everyone agrees, that when we have this kind of question, that would be best answered if we went back to the co-chairs of a subcommittee and the subcommittee to try to inform the question. So to Dr. Bowe's question about license 3, for example, we hopefully are not, hopefully the subcommittee members and the co-chairs are, will be willing to help frame what the answers to some of these questions would be as we continue to work on the draft. Dr. Evans, any other key points in the salary schedule that we should reference?
I think we're good.
Okay. So we can take a few minutes. I know this has been a information heavy hour and 10 minutes. Any general comments, observations, and please don't hesitate to put the issues that we need to address in the chat so we capture them. But now that we've seen the draft and we've seen the salary schedule draft, any thoughts or comments? Dr. Graham, ask in the chat the overall timeline at this point. Now that we have had the information sharing meeting, we work through the questions and the information that people have asked, and that will obviously take an additional meeting or meetings to be able to make sure we have clarity. And the draft says what we intended to say. That if at the October meeting we were at a point where we had that kind of clarity, we could take action at that meeting. That is not a requirement that we do it in October. So we want to be deliberate about making sure the document is clear, but we also want to be respectful of the state board's interest in us getting the recommendations to them in a timely manner. So we don't want to get in a hurry, but we want to be as effective as we can in getting the clarity. So it's certainly the October meeting will be discussion and deliberation of the questions that have and the comments that have been shared today.
Van, this is Ann. What you mentioned at the beginning of the meeting that these materials would be made public. I'm assuming you mean like the PowerPoint, which of course is a public meeting.
Right.
Where would they be housed so people can look at them?
They're on the state board website, and my understanding is anybody can go to that site and get the
attachment, so to say.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Just a question someone asked me, and
my question too, because I was thinking about that earlier, as people have questions, and I know there's obviously a lot of public interest in this. Other than on the agenda on the board site, which you have to click a few times to get to. Is there a Pepsi, or will it just be on the licensure page through DPI as well? Because I know I've had some questions about that. Will there be a portal where people can go and see all of this information without having to go just to the agenda?
It's only on the agenda for this on the state board website where they list all their meetings. I can send that link to everyone. So then if you have someone who needs to see that, then you can forward them that link.
Thank you.
Sure.
I also had a second question. My question is related to, there's been lots of feedback, right? Like in lots of different types of ways and through organizations and also individual emails and such. And has there been a systematic, or will there be a systematic review of that feedback?
All of the documents or communications that some come to everybody on Pepsi. I know
Yes.
people have been receiving emails and communication that go directly out to members of Pepsi. If communication had gone to Patrick previously and now to me, and it is sent to me individually or to some kind of subset, I forward that to Kim so that can be shared with everybody on Pepsi. In the past, the report versions of feedback have been shared with the subcommittees, and Pepsi would have, as members of the subcommittees, you would have received that, and Pepsi received that through Patrick. If we get any future summary documents from organizations, we'll continue to push those out. I can tell you, I've read every email I've received. I've read every document that I've received. I try to sort of make sure I'm understanding what are the patterns and what are the consistent issues that people are bringing up, and then, to your question, Ann, move that back out into the process. Many of the questions that I've seen in the emails, or the concerns that I've seen in the emails, are now in draft language in the document. So I think it's important to stress that some of the concerns and critiques now there's a correspondence to elements of the draft. But to the extent that everyone is now receiving that feedback can be discussed as we deliberate the draft. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but.
Yeah, I think we just need to, the reason I asked the question is because I wanted you to answer it, right? Like that, right? But the truth, because I feel like that we need to make sure people understand that we are reading this feedback.
Yes.
I think that needs to be very clear. Because there has been, there's not only good feedback, there's misconceptions and all those types of things. So as normal with anything that goes forward. But right. Thanks, Van.
And I appreciate you. I appreciate your point. We ask for feedback, and we want feedback, and we receive it. If it comes to me as the chair, or to members if it comes to me as chair, as I said, I'm pushing that out. People should read it and pay attention to what those suggestions. Sometimes they are critical comments. Sometimes they're positively reflective comments. I would also recommend, as I said yesterday at the Innovation Lab, While the document, the draft that is now public, we now have a draft. We have a draft of a model that we're considering in Pepsi. It is important that people read it carefully. I know that there are parts of it that may feel tedious because of the level of detail, but it is really important for people publicly and stakeholders to look at the draft and take it into consideration. And as they give us feedback, it's really helpful that it comes in the form of a recommendation that the individual might recommend. And we have received, I mean, I've seen feedback that does that, and it's appreciated. So, and it's a really good point. And I think we have a responsibility in Pepsi to make sure we, number one, review that information, and number two, we bring it into the deliberations when it helps inform the work we're doing.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
I also I'm seeing all these notes in the chat. I also don't want to, I'm not saying that no one's reading the feedback. I'm saying we need to make it clear to the public that we are reading the feedback.
Yes.
So, just all the people that are like, I read my feedback. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
I'll say that some of the co-chairs have noted that they've read the feedback and tried to address certain things with the feedback or acknowledge certain feedback items. So that has been some of the response.
Yeah. Right. It's hard to individually respond. I do want to be transparent about that because of the number and being able to literally respond to every single individual who might send an email or be part of an organization. So it's not being disrespectful to the person sending the message, it's the volume of information that we receive. I will say, as chair, in the presence of everybody on the commission, if I receive a request from the media to talk about the work, I do everything I can to honor that request and to speak as transparently as I can about the work. We have made an important and helpful transition in that we now have a draft that is before Pepsi that is being considered by Pepsi. I think that is the work we've done before has been monumentally important, but it's sat in 4 subcommittees and had not been synthesized into the document that we have now. And now that document is both in draft and under deliberation by Pepsi. So the next, I don't want to jump too soon if people have other questions, but I will work with Kim to make sure everything that has been received in the chat can be shared with the Pepsi members, and that when we have questions or we have points that people brought up where we may need to go back to the co-chairs of the different subcommittees to inform that point. And in some cases, there might actually be a resolution that it got resolved, but hasn't appeared in the draft yet. We would incorporate that into the draft that we will look at in October. So we'll continue to work the document based on the feedback that we're getting and continue to connect with the co-chairs and potentially the co-chairs reaching out to subcommittee members for clarification. We will, at a minimum, have a meeting in October where we deliberate, discuss, and unpack the continued revision of the document. And if appropriate, would take action. If appropriate, to continue the discussion into a subsequent meeting, we will do that. So.
I just want to say, I think Connie Locklear's comment in the chat might be something, Van, you might want to look at.
Is it clear that this is not a merit pay model?
Yes.
In my mind, it is. That is a question others on the commission other commission members may want to speak to, but in my mind as a chair, in the traditional sense of how we have used the term merit pay, I do not think it is a merit pay model in the traditional use of that term.
This is Connie. I think that is something that needs clarity. I think that is the concern with a lot of individuals in the field, that they're considering this merit pay. And I think we came to this work and the goal was to put individuals in the classroom that had trouble with passing the praxis, passing the test. And I think that we're clear on our end, but I'm asking, are we putting information out there to ensure to the public and adding clarity to that point? Because I do not think it's clear to the public.
Dr. Dempsey, this is Catherine Truitt. May I speak?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I think these are all excellent comments and confirm for me personally what I've been thinking for a while now, which is that the vast majority of feedback that I receive, for which, like Dr. Dempsey said, I'm very grateful. The challenge for me in responding to the volumes of feedback received is that the majority of the feedback is grounded in a misinterpretation or misstatements and facts about the draft model as it currently is. And so when there is, to Dr. Locklear's point, an absolute misunderstanding of facts when it comes to the model, that is problematic. I think it was Jeff Coltrane who defined merit pay for us weeks ago as, in the private sector, merit pay is when pay is given out in competition with one another. This pay proposal is in competition with oneself, or you are being measured against yourself, not someone else. And so I think it is very important to clarify that that compensating teachers according to the impact that they have in the classroom, or as Maureen Stover said yesterday at the Best in C Innovation Lab, are my students better on day 180 than on day one because I was their teacher, is not merit pay.
Dr. Dempsey, this is Maureen, if I could just add on to the superintendent's comments. So our major goal in this entire endeavor was to improve educational opportunities for kids and to get the right people into classrooms to be able to be their teachers. As a practitioner, the way I know how to best meet the diverse needs of every single learner in my classroom is by knowing exactly where they are in their learning and then designing instruction around what they need to get to where they need to be. We do have effectiveness tools that are being developed as part of this model, but those effectiveness tools are tools that will enable practitioners to know where their students are. And then there will be support from adult leadership teachers to help classroom teachers understand how to collect data from those tools, interpret the information they're getting from those tools, and then use that information they're getting to design instruction for their students. And I think that because we've talked about ensuring that teachers are effective practitioners and have the tools to be effective practitioners, that has translated into some people thinking that we're discussing merit pay, and we're not discussing merit pay. We're discussing how do we give teachers the tools that they need that's coming from the state level, and ensuring that all 115 of our LEAs have those equitable tools. How do we develop that at a state level and then give that to our teachers so that they can meet the needs of every single kid in their class? Because all 1.5 million kids that are in our public schools deserve to have their individual and personalized needs met when they are enrolled in public school. And that's really what these effectiveness tools will enable us to do. They will enable us to give teachers the information they need to be able to design that personalized instruction that every single student is entitled to.
Thank you, Maureen.
I added the link to the agenda in the chat. If anybody has any questions about that before the meeting ends, let me know.
The link to the agenda for today.
That's correct, but that will get you to other meetings,
Right.
any future meetings.
Yeah, as people have just commented, and there are 2 or 3 comments in the chat. This will take continued work and being diligent on our part, and my part in particular, to make sure that we are articulating as clearly and succinctly as possible what we now have come to as the draft recommendations and the concerns. I totally respect the concerns, sometimes the frustrations that educators and retired educators have communicated about what people perceive this to be, and what some of the developmental work that we've been doing in the subcommittees might have suggested. We want to be clear as we're moving forward that we are drafting. We are in the process of revising this document. We are paying attention to the feedback and the critiques and the concerns, and we welcome and take responsibility for engaging that feedback in the work. To the original question that appeared in the chat, we will about merit pay. We will have to continue to make sure we are addressing as transparently and clearly as we can the concerns about that question. I think it is a major step forward that we are now discussing a document. We, for the first time, are discussing recommendations that are before Pepsi and how to make those recommendations as effective and clear as possible. So I know we all take that responsibility quite seriously. Any other questions for the good of the order? I said to, as a closing comment, I said to a stakeholder who called me yesterday afternoon that in the time that I have served on Pepsi and come to know the folks who've been here and the folks who are new to the committee, to the commission, this is important, potentially transformative work for children, educators, schools, and communities in North Carolina, and I fundamentally believe that. I cannot think of a group of people who can bring more experience, expertise, wisdom, and integrity to the charge that is before us than Pepsi. And good for North Carolina that Pepsi is responsible for doing this work. And I try to say that as often and as publicly as I can. You are an impressive group of commissioners, and we're doing good work. We're not doing perfect work, but we're doing good work. And I do appreciate and respect what everyone brings to this effort. All of the work of Pepsi, but in particular, this effort. Any other business, or Dr. Evans, anything else for the good of the order before we close out?
No, I don't have anything other than your final chairman's comments.
Got it.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Before you close up, if I can just say something, if I can just have a moment of privilege as vice chair real quick, before we close out and before you share some comments, I want to echo exactly what you said. I appreciate everyone's time. And one thing I do want to share, because everyone put hours into this, and I know we probably have a lot of people listening in that are not on the commission that have certainly been interested in what work we're doing, because it will impact every teacher in North Carolina. But yesterday at the Best NC Lab event, which was very good. I did leave about an hour early, but was very good up to the point anyway that I left. I did have people share with me about how some individuals on the commission had and on the subcommittees had really been kind of beat up some by outside folks. On the way they thought about moving forward in some of these discussions and all, and that concerned me. I know my understanding is there may even been some personal attacks made on social media and all, and that does concern me. And I just want to say this. I don't know that any of us, we may have signed up for it in many ways, but I don't know that any of us that are getting a penny more than our day job in doing this. And it's been work because it's been heart work, as they say, because we know this is going to impact so many teachers in the state and future educators as well. And hopefully we're doing work that will encourage our young students today to choose a career in education. And I think that's what we're all in here for, no matter if you're on the K-12 side or the higher ed side. And so I just want to say that it's unfortunate if outsiders have done that to anyone. And to know that you've all done great work, both on the commission and on the subcommittee. And I know when it comes to salary, which I helped co-chair with Dr. Graham, it wasn't easy work. And talking about salaries and how we can increase teacher salary, all that is hours and hours of conversation, to the point we really didn't even finish all the work we wanted to finish. And so I do want to say thank you. I know this wasn't easy. We have had a lot of meetings, and I'm just very fortunate to have served in this capacity with everyone, and look forward to future work. But thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So next month, we will continue this discussion and review the questions and comments that we have received today. Before we close, I would like to introduce two new Pepsi members who started their terms on September 1st, 2022. Welcome to Miss Madison Edwards, social studies teacher at North Carolina Cyber Academy. Welcome, Madison. And welcome to Dr. Bill Griffin, the Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources in the Caldwell County Schools. Welcome, Bill. I hope everybody will reach out and congratulate these folks and welcome them to the work. Thank you for your participation and your contributions to the discussion today. Thank you, commission members, advisors, and staff for your preparation for the discussions. I remind commission members that our next monthly meeting will be held virtually on Thursday, October the 13th from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. We have now completed our meeting, and unless there is additional business at this time, I ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Connie.
Thank you. Seconded?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you so much for your work and time and energy today. We are adjourned.
Good job, Van.
Thank you. Thank you, Ann.
Thank you.
Ann.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good afternoon and rest of the morning.
Take care.
Thank you, Kim.